some of you on here. It's great to see all of you back here for our third session of the Accelerator, or for those of you who just might be joining us, welcome. We hope that you continue to join us. Emily has created a YouTube channel where all of these recorded sessions can be found. So if you need that link, just let me know. We can get that out to you. By now, many of you have probably moved past the what if stage. So you either have a clear business idea or you are already in the thick of running your own operation. But as you've likely realized, simply having a great idea is not only the beginning. The real question is, how do you build a structure that really lasts? So in this session, we're going to bridge that gap between where you are, where you want to be, by focusing on some pillars of a sustainable business. The first is going to be the business model. We're going to have the MIA team that's going to talk to you about the engine of your business, how you create, deliver, and capture that value. Then we're going to have the business planning, where Jody Broadwater from the SBDC will dive into the strategic roadmap where you need to navigate growth and secure your future. Finally, I'm going to wrap up the evening by discussing how you protect everything that you're building. And we're going to talk about succession planning, who will run that business after you, and harvesting, about how you will eventually turn that hard work into a financial return for yourself. So let's get started with Mike Ducker of the MIA team. So over to you, Mike. You're
Which
on mute.
version of the presentation do you see? Everybody see that?
Yep.
Okay, great. Um, Hi, everyone. For those who don't remember or haven't seen me before, Mike Ducker, ecosystem manager for the Maryland Energy Innovation Accelerator. Just really quickly, I wish I would have known about business model development when I partaked in my first startup in the late 1990s. I was working on a startup to do e-learning in China. And this is 30 years ago, obviously a long time. Everything was changing very quickly. It was the height of the internet bubble. It was fast changing. Most of the companies doing anything around e-learning were very early startups themselves. So the value chain wasn't quite put together. The market was just starting in China. There was only 15 million people on the internet back in those days. So it was a lot of variables. And I actually created a 40-page plus business plan with with a massive Excel spreadsheet for forecasting, a massive Microsoft Power Plant, and implementing the business plan. And I felt like literally I'd be spending an hour every day changing everything because things were changing so quickly. And the point is to talk about, I didn't know at the time, but you really what you needed was like a way to think about your business model because so many variables were unknown that you could change quickly to help you plan. And so I'm going to talk about a tool that I wish I would have had 30 years ago, regarding that. So we're going to talk about the business models, how to use it. And really, I break down the business model into three areas: product market fit, go to market strategy, and building a business. So we'll quickly go over that, those sessions. And this is very high level, Stacy. So I should be able to get it done in the 20 plus minutes that you allowed at me. But if people do have questions, please speak up as I go through it. Um, so the thing about a business model, it's kind of like a tool. It can be used in many different ways. It can be used as an analysis tool. It could help you brainstorm with your co-founders or employees. You could easily use it as a scenario planning tool. As you change one variable, you change other variables with it. It's a way to communicate to your employees, mentors, or partners of what you're trying to do. But overall, what you're trying to get out of the business model is to help you focus on what you need to do next in your business. That's the most critical part of this. So it's not about filling out a document. It's really helping you think through different scenarios and helping you sort of continuing understand the business environment you're in, so you can start focusing and creating a game plan of how to move forward. And that focus helps you create momentum, which is super important for any startup. Um, I like to use the business model canvas. I don't know if anybody's seen this before, if you guys use it at Frostburg at all, um, or SBDC. It seems to be the most highly used sort of tool to think through the business model. I know I've seen other variations of the business model, but I think they all try to capture different parts of the business. If anybody has any comments on this. Um, so the best way to think about this is the middle is really the value your product that you're envisioning provides. The right half, as you look at the screen, is really your market and how you reach your market. The back half is really your operations. And then obviously at the bottom is sort of the financial part. But to make this even simpler, I think about this in sort of three ways. Um, First, I'd like to think about how your product connects to a specific customer segment. Some people will call that product market fit. So you're creating a product that really meets a need for a customer. And so you have sort of this product customer fit. That's usually the most important thing to think about first. The second part is really how are you going to communicate that product to the customer? So that's all your marketing and sales and such. So that's usually the second part of the business you think about. And then the last part is how do you build the capabilities both internally and the relationships externally to build the operations around your business. And so if you think about it in that way, it kind of simplifies what the business model is. And so I'm going to quickly go over sort of these three parts to help you think about when you start developing a startup, what you how do you use this business model canvas and what are the things you need to think about. Any questions so far? Okay. So the most important slide that I'd like to highlight is this one. Um, if you do anything when building a business, it's building a product people love. This is the most important thing you could ever do. If you build things people love, your life as a business person will be easy. Um, People, you get more word of mouth marketing. When there's an issue, customers are more willing to work with you. People want to be your employees when you have a great product. So one of the most important things, is to be as focused on building a product that a customer loves. I'm not a customer, but a marketplace loves than anything. It will create a lot of momentum for you. And as I said in the beginning, momentum is really important. Now, building something you people hate, that's also not bad because if you build something people hate, you'll probably find out. It's when you build something that is kind of mediocre, which is kind of medium, which is kind of blah, or, it's not, no one will give you the feedback that you need to hear that this isn't really an interesting product. This isn't solving my problem. This isn't, solving the things I need as a product. And so one of the questions in the what we call product market fit is how do you recognize that you're building a product that people will love? Because building something that people feel mediocre about, or it's nice, it's interesting, that's not a good thing, and will probably not help you grow a company that's going to be successful. Developing a product people love is super important. So if you get anything out of this presentation, it's build things that people will love, and it will really help create momentum in growing your company. So just how do you know if people love your product? Um, you know, I guess we don't have time for me getting answers, but let me just kind of give you some kind of measurement of this. A lot of startups, they will do a survey like before they introduce their product, to get what people's opinions about their product. It's not a very good way of getting feedback. It doesn't give you it's not something investors would really go to. It can give you some indicators, but it doesn't mean that if someone says I will buy your product, it doesn't mean they will buy your product. And there's lots of case studies that have shown that someone has a good sort of pre-product survey. It doesn't mean they have good sales, because what people buy and what their opinions are and what they will actually put, what they'll pay for are two different things. So having paying customers shows that you built something people love. Having people come back and buy your product shows that that you created something people love. Getting referral letters, or love letters, or unsolicited press, or when you start selling more than you actually have the capacity for. So as a founder, someone who's leading your company, you should always be sort of very focused on, do I have an amazing product that people love? Am I getting these types of indicators and feedback as I get it out there in the marketplace? Because if you get one paying customer and they don't buy your product again, or they don't refer to another customer, or you have to start asking what is going on here. So number one, build something people love. Um, One of the best ways to build something people love is to focus in on a very specific market segment. I won't go too detail on this because we're going to go after. I think we have a go to market session that will really kind of hammer in on this. But the more you can focus in very characteristics of the customers you want to focus on, the more you're going to be able to really build something. I mean, um, was it 2 weeks ago, we learned about sort of, the whole, what are we calling this, outdoor community out there? Like, it's a very specific marketplace, those that are bikers or, outdoor enthusiasts who are out there in tourism. So how can you find, specific niches like that and focus? Because the more you can focus in on a very specific segment, the better or easier it is to build a product for that segment. When you try to produce for a mass market, it's really hard to get a product people love. So one of the easiest ways to get people to love your product is to focus in a very, very, very specific market segments. And again, we'll have another session where we go a bit more deeper in this and what that means from a marketing and go to market situation. Um, but what a market segment does, again, it gives you focus, which is very critical. So on the product market fit part of your business model, so the value proposition to the customer segment, what you're trying to do is list out not functionality of your products, but values of your products, to a specific market. So I remember last week there was a gentleman creating like a healthy sort of natural product that he was giving to athletes. And so when you like for him, I was just using him as an example. If you fill out this business model canvas, you will put in what are the values you're creating. So you're creating, you're developing healthy minerals for energy. It's natural, so it won't hurt people. And he was very focused on a very specific segment, which were athletes or even college athletes from this. So when you do a business model canvas, you're trying to connect the two dots. Any questions so far? All right. So again, we're going to have a whole session on go-to-market acquisition, so I won't go too deep detail on this. But mark, go-to-market acquisition is really trying to optimize your marketing and sales channels for each target market that you're going after. And you're trying to also to determine what is the best way to describe the product to your target market. Um, and you kind of manage that with data, especially with a lot of the digital tools we have out there. And there's a other thing called growth hacking where you can do small experiments around different marketing campaigns. Again, we'll go over this in a different session. But So once you figure out like your customer segment, you start thinking about your go-to-market strategy. How are you going to communicate? What channels are you going to use to communicate? And then using data to see how well your go-to-market strategy is working. So I won't go too much again detail on this, but on your go-to-market strategy, if you look at your business model canvas, and again, I'm going back to the gentleman who had the natural food. You know, part of what he has to do for the customer messaging, he has to educate how the minerals in his product will provide energy to athletes, in the way he communicates it or the channels he's using sports influencer IG, on Instagram or TikTok. So when you fill out this form, what you're trying to figure out is I have this target market. It's athletes. They want more and more energy, and what do I need to communicate with to them? Like you want to communicate how your product provides them more energy through research. You want to give them case studies of other athletes who've used this. And then you want to pick channels, marketing channels, where they might be, the people who are following those sports influencers on Instagram and TikTok. Again, we'll go more into this section another time, but I just wanted to kind of overview it on the business model part. Any questions regarding that? All right. I must be an amazing teacher here because no questions. Um, so the last part of the business model is really your operations. And from an operation, like what is your going to be your capability as a company? Um, this diagram that I have in the presentation is the strategy of Amazon. Amazon sells thousands and thousands of products, but really what Amazon is, it tries to drive a strategy that looks like this. They're going to have low prices, which make a better customer experience and drives traffic. When they have more traffic, they have more people who sell. When they have more people who sell, they have bigger selection. And so while they're creating this massive infrastructure, they're constantly trying to figure out how to create a lower infrastructure, which lowers prices, which gives a so you're creating a business that has this reoccurring cycle of a strategy. So we talked about, before we talked about your product and how people love your product, but really you're not just a product, you're a business. And so the question is over the long run, how can you create a compelling business and have a strategy that reinforces what you think your vision of your company should be. And usually, this part of the business model is really about how do you build that bigger vision of your company. Um, so a lot of it is how do you build your team and your first employees. There's been studies done. The biggest reason companies, especially early startups, go under is because they have conflicts with their founders. If you have you have co-founders, often they're not aligned on this same vision. So as you're building your startup, you need to think about, and you have co-founders, you have to be aligned on visions. You can't just talk about this product you want to build in the next 6 months. You actually also have to talk about where do we see our company in 5 years, 6 years, 7 years? Are we going to keep this company and give it to our kids, to Stacy's probably presentation, or do we want to sell it to an investor? And there's no wrong answer. It's just it needs to be the same answer. Otherwise, it'll create conflict with your founders. And so you also have to do self evaluations, like real truthful kind of insights of who you are as founders, what are you good at from an expertise, what types of people do you want around you, um, and then as you hire out and bring on other people, you have to think about, not just as you hire people, you might say, well, I need a finance person. It's more than that. As you bring in your first employees, you're really setting the culture and you're developing the systems to grow your company. And so, as you bring in these people, you have to think about what culture do you want? Do you want a creative, free spirited culture? Do you want more of a culture that kind of focuses on system efficiencies. There's no wrong answer. You just have to again think about that and how it aligns with your business. Um, so in building your core capabilities, you're also thinking about the value chain. So the value chain is basically all the tasks that have to be done to deliver a product or service to a customer. And oftentimes not one company will do it all. For example, in this slide, we're talking about, if we're in adventure tourism, you have to have someone who's collecting, doing marketing, doing lead generations, doing bookings, designing your trips, organizing your trips, prepared, deliver the field experiences. Maybe you have someone who's providing food, and then you have to think about how do I retain those so the next time they go to Western Maryland, they come here. And so in this process, you might have one, two, three companies doing this. You might have a marketing firm that has a lot of web and digital things going out to bring in customers. You might have another firm that is actually providing the service, a third firm that's providing some of the food. And so part of what you have to think about as you're building your company is what part of the value chain do you want to be? And when you're small, you don't want to try to do everything. You want to do the things that you're good at and outsource the rest. And there's nothing wrong as you grow your company to start doing more and more parts of the value chain. So another part of building your company is understanding where in the value chain you're at, and every industry has a different value chain. So, again, going back to the business model canvas, if we fill out these last two sections about key activities and resources, um, like for example, again, for the natural food company, you might say, your key activities is identifying and marketing natural materials that provide energy. And your key resources, you might be looking for like an outside commercial kitchen, or you might be looking for a lab to certify the results of what you're doing. But the point is, you're identifying what are the key things your company does, and what are the things that you need help with from outside companies. Um, does that make sense on the sort of operation part of the business model? Okay. Uh, I'll just quickly talk over the revenue part. Um, you shouldn't have a lot of startups come to us and they have 5 or 6 ways they make money. Typically, that doesn't happen. Usually, you have two or less revenue models, and then you might grow them over time. But when you start off, it's not good to have different revenue models. So in your business model canvas, you'll write down, like for example, I'm going to do e-commerce sales is my revenue model, or you might have I'm going to do a monthly subscription service regarding that. So that's how you would put it into this part of the business model canvas. Um, I don't want to get too deep into costs. I've 1 minute to talk about cost accounting. But basically, what you're trying to understand is you're trying to understand what your operational cost will be. So, what does it take to build the infrastructure of your business? And as you go and do a recurring business, what are going to be your operational costs, your marketing costs, your general and administration cost? Again, this isn't an accounting class, so we'll go too deep into it. But and again, this is a diagram, so you're not going to like put this down into the diagram itself, but you're trying to understand what are some of the major cost components of the business model canvas. Um, and with that, I'll just say, because I quoted Mike Tyson last week, the business model canvas is a way to help you adjust to a very, very chaotic world, which we're in. Because it's not like you're going to write this down. You're using this as a tool to plan and understand the environment you are in today, which will continue to change from that perspective. So with that, I know I was quick. I will take any questions if there's any. All right. I don't see any questions, Stacy. So
Okay.
I,
I have to plug in real quick. My battery's dying. Give me
no,
two
no
seconds.
worries.
I should have thought
But
about this before. All right.
hopefully that's a good handoff to Jody to talk about sort of the how this relates potentially to the business plan. You know, how it helps actually feed into the business plan.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, and it does. So and Stacy said it earlier. She said it best whenever she said that the business model is really the engine, right? And that's how I would describe it. It is the engine, and the more traditional business plan, if you will, is the rest of the car and the GPS, right, to get you where you're going, and some of those more fine-tuned details. So back in the day, right? So Mike mentioned 30 years ago. So 30 years ago, I was involved with three businesses, and we were looking to grow them. They were doing really well, and we wanted to expand one of the businesses. Went to the bank, and decided to take out a loan. And they asked for a business plan and financial projections. And I'm like, well, wait a second. We have three businesses. We run them all without a business plan and financial projections, right? I have what I have, but they wanted something more detailed. So they referred us actually to the Small Business Development Center where we sought help. I'm now the regional director for the Small Business Development Center in Western Maryland, and we cover business plans in detail. We do one-on-one consulting. The services are at no charge and confidential. We do a lot with financial projections. Some of our consultants are on the call. We cover the three most western counties, and we serve over 7,000 people each year in our training program. So it's very robust, and we see a lot of entrepreneurs at different stages. Some the business model fits really nicely, and others need a little more detailed, and especially with that financial projections. 30 years ago, you would see a business plan upwards of 40, 50, even 100 pages. The first one I ever wrote was about that. So it was extensive because we were told the more details, the better. They had to be detailed. Now, the bank doesn't even want to see that. They want to see a business plan, but they do not want to see 100 pages for sure. And don't have AI write all of your business plan. For goodness sake, don't do that. We saw one recently that was about 123 pages that AI wrote. And we were like, oh, nobody wants to read this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the business plan and some of the components and the importance of that, and why they really do matter. So um, for us at the SBDC, it's all about creating that structure and getting in the weeds with the client and really getting in there. So the business plan, we describe it as it truly is your roadmap to success. It covers the business concept, market opportunity, operations in detail, financial projections. Um, and the beginning of it is an executive summary, right? And I have slides to show all of this, but they're smaller and they're very detailed. And so I just wanted to hit the highlights and follow. So the executive summary is often it's written last, right? So you'll hear that in academics. It's critical for investors and lenders. And sometimes, depending on who the client is and what the client need is, we might just start with financial projections first, right? Is this even feasible? Is it doable? Let's look at the financial projections to figure this out, to see how the business plan looks, right? So is there money in there? So that's really what it's all about. If you can't summarize it clearly, then you don't fully understand it. And that is really important. You're going to want to have a mission and a vision, right? You're going to have some sort of legal structure identified within the business plan, the industry overview, the value proposition, what makes you unique, right? So, what is that? If I'm going to open up a pizza shop, there's 10 pizza shops on my street or within my community. What makes me any different? That has to come through. What is your competitive advantage? So those are the things that really is going to be embedded within the business plan that's going to help sell that business plan. Lenders, bankers, investors, those are the some of the key stakeholders that want to see that more robust plan. And and so it really depends on what the outcome is and your goal, whether you're going to use the business model canvas, the lean business model as we call it, or the more traditional. So the business description will clarify your identity and long-term direction of where you're going. A market analysis will be covered within the business plan. Target customers, right? Industry trends, what are they? The market size, the competitive analysis, and what those barriers to entry are. It reduces risk and it demonstrates that you understand the landscape. The last thing the bank wants to know when you go in and hand them the business plan, and we've had this happen multiple times, they say, we don't have any competition, right? Yes, you do. Yes, you do. So to really highlight that within the plan, to know that you've identified that the investors like to see that, the lenders like to see that. It also, we do a lot with vertical IQ and research. So if you come into one of the consultants, we use vertical IQ and the Ezra, which is a GIS database system. And within like a 30-mile radius, we can show how many coffee shops there are, right? How many employees they have. If it's, if it's been successful, all of those things are highlighted in that research, and that research becomes part of the business plan. Some of the templates that we have, one of our former consultants, created a financial projection spreadsheet that some of the consultants use, and within that, it has the debt to income ratio that the bank likes to see. It has the financial risk converted from the vertical IQ. So you can see whether it's green, whether it's red, and it's very risky, right? So that is super important for those that are lending the money, that you understand that and that you work through that. And what is the ownership structure? That's something that's going to be very important. And as Mike talked about earlier, what is that ownership and how does that look? So the roles and responsibilities are going to be outlined. You're going to talk about that. We often see folks come in and say, yes, I really want to do this. I'm going to write the business plan, I gung ho, but they haven't talked to their spouse or their support or any of that. And things can go sideways pretty quickly. So really identifying those roles and responsibility and what they are. Investors invest in people as much as in ideas. That is so important because your character matters. And if you've thought about those roles and responsibilities and it's highlighted within the plan, it shows that you've, thought that through. The products and service obviously is going to be identified in there, and be clear on what you're truly selling. Be clear on what you're truly selling. What is that? Marketing and sales strategy will be a part of your business plan. Customer acquisition, pricing strategy, distribution channels, partnerships, those letters of support, right? The letters of love that Mike talked about, that's also going to be within your business plan. That's really important. Revenue doesn't just happen by accident. There has to be a plan and a strategy in place. Where is that coming from and what does that look like? The operational plan, the location, the technology, the suppliers, the vendors, who you're in partnership with. Are there any collaborations? as well as your staffing needs, right? So that's really important. And it shows feasibility if you incorporate that within your business plan. The financial projections are really important within the business plan. So oftentimes banks want to see the first year of your financial projections month by month, and then after that they want to see yearly for 5 years. So you're identifying those startup costs. People come in and say, hey, well, I'm not going to have this expense, or I'm not going to have that expense. Yeah, you probably are. Or if they have zero in the marketing budget, you're saying, well, wait a second, realistically, you need something in those categories. Profit and loss projections, cash flow statements, break even analysis, your balance sheet, all of those things are covered within the more traditional business plan. And so the more traditional business plan can be a little bulky, and it's going to be bigger, but it is also not something that you write one time and then just sit on the wayside, right? So you will revisit this plan. As Mike mentioned, it's maybe a little more cumbersome to look back into, but the details are there. So it's required for loans and investments. Oftentimes, it tests the assumptions and it identifies the cash gaps before they happen. If you do that, which is critical to a business, and it separates the hope from strategy, right? So um, Mike's is more of a one-page visual framework, which is really important, and you can go back and forth and change things pretty quickly with that. Within the more traditional business plan, it's a long-term planning. It's formal documentation, right? We all have. How important is the SWOT analysis for your second? Oh, I can't see all the question. Hold on, Joanne, and I'll take a look at that in a second. So it's the formal documentation is the more traditional business plan. So it's financially rigorous, and it's sometimes you can find anywhere from 10 pages upwards, depending on those financial projections and some of the details, and some of the business plans are 20 pages, depending on what the individual is wanting to open. So let me see the question, Joanna, because I don't want to.
Joanna asked, how important is a SWOT analysis for your second rewrite of your business model?
So within the more traditional business plan, your SWOT analysis is in there, right? What the strengths are, your weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. They're outlined in detail within the business plan. Mike, do you want to address it for your business model?
It really depends how old the company. For a lot of our startups that are not quite operating yet, they don't really have a strength or weakness. They have assumptions of what their strengths or weaknesses are. So it's less used in the business modeling part. um it's probably a strength is probably more representative in the values of the product in that middle section of the business model. And the opportunities is probably more on the up, the market side, but we don't go through a pest analysis traditionally and things like this, although that's part of why there might be an opportunity in the marketplace. So it's not done as a unique analysis, but parts of what some of the data that might pop up into a SWOT analysis will probably be seen in a business model canvas.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Okay. So the attracting investors, the angel investor group, buying, selling a business, scaling operations, major strategic pivots, right? The more traditional business plan has use there. they are not competitors. I don't feel as the lean business plan and the more traditional business plan are competitors. They're both tools to be used at different stages, right? So depending on where you are, depends maybe on what you will actually use. So to be clear about your vision and where you're going, I think is really helpful. Businesses with formal business plans are more likely to secure funding. Financial forecasting reduces early stage cash flow failure, and cash flow remains a leading cause of small business failure. So we see that a lot in the work that we do at the SBDC. And with the financial projections, we can plan for those gaps, provide maybe an opportunity to put in working capital and present that to the lending institution. Post-pandemic lending standards are tighter than they've ever been. Documentation matters more than ever. And in rural and regional markets, relationship banking is still strong, but they still expect some sort of structure when you come in and you're asking for money from them. So just to wrap this up, passion starts businesses. Planning sustains and grows them. Lean Canvas helps you think. Business plans help you scale. You don't write a plan because you have to. You write it because your future self will thank you. And we have people come in, one of which we had a client in Garrett County came through and said, hey, taking the business plan and understanding that and working through those details. In my 30 or 40 years of owning and operating a business, I didn't have that, but they needed money. They were working on a succession plan, which Stacy will talk about the importance of that. And so they work through the exercise, her and her husband. And every time I see them, they're like, thank you for that. That was so good because we never did that before. And, it helped us better understand who we were, where the gaps were, and help to build the success for as they continue to plan their legacy of whether this is passed down with the kids or sold as a business. So again, it's depending on who the audience is and what the need is, depends on which model, which plan you might use. So hopefully that's been a little insightful. Any questions or anything? Questions? Okay. Thank you, Stacy. I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Well, I think both have been very informational. And Joanna, I know you're on here, so I really hope you encourage the students to view the YouTube recording. And hopefully this is reinforcing some of what you're teaching in your courses right now. So Mike and Jody have kind of talked about the front end of the business. I'm going to go into a little bit more towards the end of the business life. Let me see if I can share my screen. I do have some slides. Let me see. Can you guys see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. It's weird. I can't see them. I can't see my slides. So this is going to be kind of interesting. I can't see what's going on up there. Why can't I see my slides? Okay. Well, we're going to go with this. So, I was really hoping to see a lot of business owners here today because I think this portion of the presentation is going to speak more to standing businesses, but I want to discuss a topic that probably every business owner will eventually face, even if it's not something that we enjoy talking about. And that's really what happens to your business when you're ready to step away. It could be retirement. It could be that you're just done running the business. There could be health issues. So whether retirement's right around the corner or if we're talking decades away, the work that you do now is really going to determine if your exit is a crisis or if it's really what we call a crowning achievement of all the work that you've done. So we're going to talk about planning your business future, succession and harvesting, and protecting your legacy and your financial future. So if you currently own a business, or again, you plan to in the future, as that business owner, most of us spend our days really focused on keeping the business running. Sooner or later, you're going to start asking these questions. What's going to happen to the business when I'm done? Who's going to take over the leadership? Is my business going to continue to serve within the community or the space where it operates? Perhaps it's an e-commerce business. Sometimes you want to ask yourself, how am I going to benefit financially from all the years? And sometimes this can be decades for businesses of hard work that they've actually put into that business. Ideally, that hard work should translate into something very meaningful for your future. So we start asking ourselves, why does it matter? Why does planning matter now? I've learned from many businesses that I talk to that they don't avoid planning because they don't care. They avoid it because they are busy. They are managing payroll. They're managing customers. They're putting out the fires of the day. Planning for 10 years away, it feels like a luxury that they just can't afford today. But time moves fast, as we could probably all attest to. 10 years becomes 5, 5 becomes 2, and we get down to the reality that owners who plan early have options. Those planners or those owners who wait too long sometimes have those options forced upon them. So planning isn't about rushing to retire. It's really about protecting your choices. So we start talking about, and I want to define our first key term, and that is succession planning. Simply, the plan is for who will run the business after you. It's all about continuity. We ask the question, who's going to make the decisions? Who's going to be managing my team? There is no one-size-fits-all answer. You might pass it on to a family member. You might sell it to a loyal employee or a group of employees. You might hire a professional management team that's going to run it while you retain ownership. The goal is really to ensure that the business doesn't disappear just because you aren't there every day. So, a successful transition is not a single event, but it really is a multi-year process. To maximize both the continuity of the business, which is a succession, your timeline should really, ideally, span about a decade. So I want to break this slide down a little bit. I know there's some good information in here that I just want you to understand. I know you're thinking 10 years, oh my golly, when we first start our business, you're just going to be hoping that you survive the first year. And then you're going to be hoping you survive 5 years. And again, as we say, time clicks on and you're sitting there maybe 15 years later and you're still running this business. What we really want you to do is think about at the 10-year mark, all of your planning is really about optionality. So at this stage, you're not rushing to exit. You're really building that business that could be sold or handed over at any time. So our goal at this 10-year point is to really shift the business from being owner-centric to more systems-centric. So we want to start identifying potential internal successors or determining if an outside buyer is necessary. We talk about family. Have those conversations. If you think that your business is going to be passed down to your kids might say, we've seen you work hard. We've seen you struggle. I don't have any plan of owning the business after mom and dad sell it. So starting this early kind of allows you to make some of those very thoughtful decisions rather than rushed ones. It kind of gives you that runway to fix any structural issues that might otherwise decrease your business's value. So now let's drop down to 5 years and we start talking about active preparation. This is really your critical window. This is where preparation meets execution. And this is the phase where you are going to make the business attractive to a buyer or to a successor. So what our goal is to really professionalize the organization to maximize the harvest. And we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. But this is a good time to start cleaning up those financial records. Document all of your standard operating procedures. Start to diversify your customer base if you haven't already. What buyers and successors really want to see is a stable history of income. They want to see a reliable system-based business. And if you wait until the 2-year mark to fix your books, you're not going to have enough clean data to really prove the business's worth to a bank or to an investor or to a successor. So that 5-year is really kind of the critical preparation stage. Now, 2 years out, we start to talk about transition readiness. So this is going to start to shift our focus to that succession, the who and the how of our daily operations. We want to ensure that the business can operate successfully without your daily involvement. So really start thinking about and intensifying the training of your successor. Really begin communicating the plan to key employees. And in some cases, it might be to your customers to make sure you maintain their confidence. But this is, within this 2-year, this is kind of like a dry run for your exit. What you might find out is that if the business struggles when you take a 2-week vacation, it isn't really ready for you to leave permanently. So you need to fix some things at that point. Then when we get down to that 0 to 1 year, we're talking about the transfer. This is kind of the final stage where the succession and or the harvesting strategy is really executed. What our goal is to make sure that we finalize the transfer of ownership. We make sure to ensure the owner is receiving their full financial benefit. So we want to execute things like the legal sale. We want to initiate structured payments or buyouts. We want to really officially hand over the keys to the new leadership. Now, because and if you have kind of done the work in the previous 9 years or 5 years, this phase should really be a smooth formality rather than a period of uncertainty. The owner should be able to step away with financial security, and the business really should continue to support your community. So I know just from that little slide, there's a lot of information. Does anybody have any questions about that slide? Okay, I don't see any. So I'm going to go on. All of that information that we talked about, you might say, where does this plan belong? What does this do? Whoops. So in your professional business transition, this succession plan is not a single document that sits in a drawer. It's really more of a comprehensive ecosystem of records that starts to validate the health and the continuity of your company. So to really be effective, the plan should be integrated across 1, 2, or even all of these critical areas. So let's talk about each one of these just a little bit further. A succession document. You can create a master transition folder, whatever you want to call it, your succession folder. This is really the who of your plan. Again, going back to what we just kind of discussed, it might include a former designation to be your successor. Again, it can be a family member. It could be a couple family members. It could be a partnership. It could be a key employee, a group of employees, or again, some type of outside buyer. Having an idea of who is going to take over your business kind of eliminates that ambiguity during that transition period. So we really want to kind of think about some of the key components being that leadership timeline, the training schedule for a new leader, and any emergency contingency plan. And you might say, oh, we don't really need that, but you need to really think what happens in case you're forced to step away earlier than planned. Perhaps there are life situations that happen. It could be a death. It could be anything that causes you to pivot. And so you want to have that backup plan in place. We talk about the business plan. Jody just ran through the business plan. You learned that that's your strategic roadmap. Most owners use that business plan to start a company, but you also need a plan to be able to finish it, or at least have a section in your business plan. A transition ready business plan really demonstrates to a buyer or to a successor that the company actually has a future, not a past. We talk about legal agreements, okay? Your corporate records, your legal counsel. This is really the how of the transfer, not howl. It would be my dogs, but anyway. These documents really turn your intentions into a binding reality, and it protects both your financial interest and the business's continuity again. We really want to provide a legal structure for succession or for harvesting of this business, your business value. So some of the key areas that we'll be looking at in the legal agreements would be buy-sell agreements, updated operating agreements, perhaps transfer of ownership contracts, non-compete, and or consulting agreements for the outgoing owner. So that legal arena is very important in your transition or your succession plan. Obviously, financial records, you're going to want to talk to your accountant, or your tax preparer to have all of that accounting and tax documentation in place. Financial transparency is the cornerstone of succession, and buyers will not pay top dollar for what they can't verify through your financial records. So you want to have at least 3 to 5 years of clean, audited, CPA reviewed financial statements. You want to have those tax returns. You want to have a clear breakdown of your owner's discretionary earnings, your FFE, or your fixtures, furniture, and equipment, and your inventory. So again, financial records, an extremely important area when we talk about succession planning. The last one is your operating procedures. Obviously, SOPs. We're talking about standard operations manuals. This is often the most overlooked part of succession planning. Your SOPs are your instruction manual for the next owner. So to make sure that you reduce that owner dependency and really ensure that the business doesn't struggle after the transition, go through and look at all of those documented flows, workflows for every major task. And that can be from how to run payroll to how you manage your top customer accounts. So in the end, when we talk about succession planning, why does all of this matter? Without a clear path forward, these transitions can become very high stress events. Think about it. If you want to sell within 6 months, you have to get all of this information together. That can be a very daunting process. We have all seen some very successful businesses close, and 9 times out of 10, it's not because they weren't profitable. It was simply because there was no one ready to take the wheel. There was no planning that happened prior to. When that happens, we see employees lose jobs, we see customers lose services, and even you as the owner, you walk away with less value in that business than what you expected. So this succession plan, transition plan ensures that employees know what to expect and customers can maintain their confidence in your brand. So I want to pivot just a little bit. And I've talked about succession planning, and you've heard me mention harvesting. So what is it? It's a term that many business owners aren't really familiar with, but it is the most critical part of your financial exit strategy. Simply put, when we talk about harvesting, it's the process of converting the value that you've built and you've created in your business into a personal financial return for yourself. So when we think of harvesting, think of this as the payday for your years or even decades of hard work. Okay. So how does value become personal wealth? And we start to talk about how this answers the how much. The conversion from your personal value to your personal return happens through this strategic harvesting method. And that's really tailored to what your goals are. So some of the methods on how you can harvest is you can sell your business. And this is probably the most direct way to convert your business value into either a lump sum or you can have structured payments for your future. You've heard of seller financing. Sometimes this is a great option for a business. There can be gradual buyouts. This allows you to transfer ownership over time while still providing a steady stream of income as you slowly allow yourself to exit those day-to-day operations. Really, to get the highest financial return, you really want to improve your business's harvestability. And again, we go back just like succession planning. To do that, we want to look at documenting all of our procedures, cleaning up those financial records, and ensure that the business doesn't depend entirely on you. 9 times out of 10, if your business depends entirely on you to operate it, that's not what we call a business. We call that a job. Okay, so to try to sell your job to somebody else is very difficult. So why does harvesting matter? For most owners, the business is their largest single asset. Until you have a plan to harvest it, that value is locked within that company. So harvesting is the key that unlocks that value that's going to provide you with a retirement income and some financial security. So without this harvesting plan, many owners will find themselves asset rich, but very cash poor. They're unable to retire on the timeline that they had hoped for because they really didn't prepare the business for that financial transition or that harvesting that can happen. So I want to kind of talk to you about the harvesting reality. Again, I talked to you that harvesting is that process of converting that value you've built in your company into a personal financial return for yourself. However, the actual amount of money you walk away is going to depend entirely on the quality of your plan. So the reality of harvesting follows a really steep value ladder. So without preparation, owners will often find themselves with far less value than what they were expecting. So if you have that planned transition or that planned harvest, you're going to get maximum value. So when we talk about creating that plan 5 to 10 years ahead, you have time to clean those records. You have time to document the procedures. You can build a team that can function without you. This really creates a prepared business that buyers are willing to pay a premium for. So you're going to get the maximum amount of the maximum value of money out of that business. The unplanned or no plan, you're going to get a much lower value. If you decide to sell without a plan, you're going to expect somebody to offer lower than what you had hoped to get out of that business. They're going to offer less because the business lacks a reliable system, and it really depends too heavily, again, on your presence within that business. We also talk about the emergency sale. This is going to be the lowest price that you're going to get for that business. So when a transition is forced by some unexpected health issue or crisis, like what we talked about earlier, that timeline is going to feel very different and your options start to disappear rather quickly. In these rushed scenarios, the sale price is typically significantly lower because the owner loses all of the negotiation leverage. You're trying to get a quick sale and you just need some money in your hand. That buyer is going to know that, and they're going to come in and they're going to lowball you. Obviously, with a business closure, you get no value. And this is the absolute worst case scenario for quite a few different reasons. If there is no clear path forward and there's really no buyer to be found, your business is going to simply close. And in a closure, all of those years of hard work that you've put into that business result in a zero financial return for you, for retirement, for whatever reason, but it is also not good for a community either. And we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. So you've heard me mention succession, you've heard me mention harvesting. This slide just kind of tells you they're the yin and the yang. They both have to go together. So to really summarize the difference, succession planning is all about continuity. It's about leadership. Who's going to run my business? Who's going to continue? How's this going to protect my business? Harvesting is all about the financial return. And you need both. If you have succession planning without harvesting, the business is going to live on, but you might not get the financial reward that you deserve or that you want out of that business. If you have harvesting without succession, you're going to get paid. The business, however, may struggle or it may fail shortly after you leave. So the strongest transitions balance both of these to make sure that we protect both the business and the owner. So I just want to go back and just reiterate that selling a business is nothing like selling a car. It can take years to prepare. Buyers are looking for very specific things when they come into your business. They want to see clean financial records. They want to see a couple years of those. So we all know that when you own a small business, your goal is to try to write off as much as what you possibly can so that you can get that lower income, so that you can get into a lower tax bracket. But when it comes time to sell your business, sometimes that's not the best. So you really want to clean up some of those tax documents and those financial records. You really want to look at your documented procedures. Again, we've talked about the standard operating manuals and processes. They want to see stability. They want to see reliable customers. Make sure that you have that customer or that client list updated all the time. And that's something that you can work on even if succession planning or harvesting is not within your realm. Make sure you have that list updated all the time. Independence. They want to see that the business can really operate without you involved in every single aspect. If you're the only one who knows how to fix the machines, to talk to the top clients, the business is worth a lot less to that buyer. So this early preparation that we talked about really creates that opportunity for a higher price. So we've talked about succession, we've talked about harvesting. Why do we worry? Why do we really care? The transition of a local business is really more than just a private transaction. It is a very critical event for an entire community. In our region, longstanding businesses that have been built by dedicated owners serve as the backbone of our economic stability. So when owners really engage in succession planning and harvesting, we see the positive ripple effects, and they're felt across the entire local economy and the community. It preserves local jobs. So a clear succession path will ensure that the business doesn't disappear when the owner steps away. It keeps employees in their roles, in their homes, and supports local families. So it keeps our communities thriving. It keeps businesses open. So by creating that clear path forward, succession planning really prevents successful businesses from closing simply because there was no plan for leadership. It maintains trusted services. So when a business transitions smoothly, customers will continue to have access to whatever those trusted services or products that they rely on daily. And it again, it goes back and it strengthens our economic stability. Successful harvesting allows retiring owners to really remain financially secure while we have new owners or new entrepreneurs that will keep the capital and services circulating within our communities. So ultimately, when these businesses transition, instead of closing, our community retains its character and its economic strength. So I just want to talk really briefly. FSU, we have a regional engagement division, and this is why between FSU, SBDC, and the Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation has created this Legacy Business Transition Program. We are here to help small businesses navigate these options: succession planning, harvesting, selling. We want to help businesses understand what their value is and even connect them with potential buyers. We work with people selling businesses, but we also work with entrepreneurs who want to buy existing businesses. And that's often sometimes much safer for a person than starting a new one from scratch. So perhaps matching startup entrepreneurs to existing businesses is the better way to go. Whatever the reason, our goal is really to keep our regional economy stable by ensuring that we have longstanding businesses continue to thrive throughout the next generations that we have coming through. So, just in closing, we know that every owner is going to essentially go through and face this transition period. The best outcomes don't happen by accident. They really happen by design. So to have a succession plan in place really protects your legacy. That harvesting protects your financial future. And together, the two of them can ensure that all of the hard work that you've put into your business continues long after you stepped away from the business or step away from the business. So there's some information on this slide. The next session that we have is going to be a founder-student panel. So you can see all the information here. If you have any questions or information, you can contact myself or Luma. And Luma is on the call with us here as well. I do see a question that popped into the chat. Oh, it was just Joanna. She's going to post this for all of our students as soon as we send it to her. So does anybody have any questions about the succession planning or harvesting, anything? Okay, Joanna, did we meet the needs of some of your classroom material? You are on mute if you're trying to speak, and if not, I don't want to put you on the... Oh, she said this was perfect. Okay. So anyhow, I want to thank everybody. Thanks to Mike for delivering on the business models, Emily and Ben, part of the MIA team. Thank you, Jody, for delivering about business plans. And if anybody has any questions, they can connect with me. Again, that contact information's on our last slide. Reach out to us. We will be sending out the link. So thank you for everybody for attending this evening. If nobody has anything, Emily, we'll go ahead and let you close down. Oh, Luma, are you speaking? All right. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, all.
Bye.